Get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Welcome to Before Life Happens, helping you navigate life's what ifs and exploring how money can be used as a force for good. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Annalee Kruger, president of CareRight Incorporated and author of The Invisible Patient. Annalee, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. It's been a long time coming. So as we were talking pre-show, we were booked to do a show years ago, which never happened. But anyway, we're here and it's exciting. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead you to focus on aging plans and caregiving?
Yeah, good question. So going back a bit, my grandparents lived with us on the farm in Iowa when we were growing up, because in the 70s, when I was growing up, there wasn't home care, there wasn't all these different care levels, right? It was either parents, grandparents thrived or they died at home, or they moved in with their kids, or they had to go to a nursing home. Like those were the three options. And so every day as a child, I was helping take care of my grandparents, and I saw how much love that it's a loving thing to be able to do. But I also saw kind of the darker side of caregiving, because you're like, oh my gosh, grandpa fell again, or grandma won't take her medicine. What are we supposed to do? And then just kind of like how that all can unravel kind of quickly. And so that really prompted me to want to work with seniors and family caregivers. And so I went into social work, and I worked in social work and admissions or marketing director in CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities that have all those different levels of care. And I did that for over 22 years in the Midwest. And every single day, I had families in my office that mom fell, she broke her hip, she's the caregiver to dad with dementia. The hospital says, here's a list of facilities, go find one by noon tomorrow. And the kids are like, wait, she just got there. Like, what is happening? Everything is happening so fast, right? And so they would come into the care community, they didn't understand the difference between assisted living and memory care and skilled rehab. And they thought Medicare would pay for everything, or Medicaid was the same as Medicare. And they didn't understand why dad's behaving the way he is, because he used to run a bank, and why can't he set up his own meds? And, so there's just all this confusion about what is really going on as we age. Then when I would ask the kids, do your parents have a living will, power of attorney, long-term care insurance? Is your dad a veteran? Because now both parents need care, right? And their answers were always, I don't know, Annalee, we've never talked about anything like this. But then I had like this many, like teeny tiny percentage of adult kids who would say, Annalee, we saw the writing on the wall. Mom's fallen 3 times. Dad wandered away from the house last year. We tried to get everybody to get together and say, look, we got to figure something out, because they could see all these red flags. And when they tried to talk to their parents about their concerns, that we need to know, like, who's your financial advisor? What do you have in place? Like, where's your money at in case we ever have to step in and pay bills for you? But the parents gave them so much pushback that they quit trying, because it was hard on the relationship. So every day I was working with families in the same predicament, because they found themselves in crisis mode. Now they have 2 parents that need care, 2 totally different types of care, no idea how to navigate any of that. Then you've got family dynamics on top of it. And then you've also, nowadays more so, you have blended families where the adult kids have actually never met, because their parents got married in their 80s. And so the kids never really met.
Wow.
One of them had a stroke, and they're like, we don't want my mom taking care of your dad. And so in 2011, I decided, after over 22 years of working in these care communities where families just truly, I've never come across a family who actually understands any of this aging, dementia, family caregiving, how to navigate care. And so I started my own virtual consultancy called CareRight Incorporated in 2011. The reason I went virtual is for 2 reasons. Number one, because the market changed. In the 90s and the early 2000s, families lived pretty close to each other. They were down the street, they got together, they actually had somewhat better relationships. But by the time I started my own consultancy in 2011, families just didn't live near each other. They're all in different time zones and all that. So I had to start a virtual consultancy, and I used Skype at the time. So that I could facilitate their family meetings and help them understand dementia and help them understand the lay of the land for senior care. And we have to put a plan in place, because otherwise parents will end up in whatever care facility has an open bed. And I promise you that's not going to be a good fit. And the family relationships there's so many wedges in their family relationship because there's so much confusion about dementia and senior care and how inheritance should be spent and all of that type of stuff. But the second reason I went virtual is because my own mother had early onset dementia. And I knew that I wanted to be able to help my own parents whenever I wanted to or whenever they needed me to, and be actively involved. And that required me to just make sure I had internet access wherever I was.
Well, that's fantastic. And it's quite a journey. And, you know, from what I've seen and, from guests I've had on the podcast, is that this is definitely common. And we had a discussion. I don't know if you know Cameron Huddleston, who wrote Mom and Dad, We Need to Talk, which really focuses just on having the conversation, because that in and of itself is such a huge issue. So, just out of curiosity, how do you recommend that people actually start to have that conversation? Because the parents oftentimes either don't want to think about aging, or they're of that generation where we just don't talk about these
We don't
things.
talk about things like that. Yeah. And so how to broach these topics in the first place, because this is why when I'm doing Zoom, or my team and I are doing these free Zoom consults with a prospective family, they're like, Annalee, this sounds great. Yeah, we know we need a plan, but how do we get mom and dad on board? So one way is leveraging this podcast. Say, you know what, mom and dad, or my siblings, I heard this podcast. What they were talking about really hit home for us and our family. And we are in these are the words, right? So just use this as a role play or a script. We are in uncharted territory as a family. We don't understand dementia. We don't understand what care options there are. We don't know how much care costs. And I'm here to tell you, Medicare and Medicaid are not the solution. Like these are out-of-pocket expenses if there's no long-term care insurance. So leverage this podcast, get educated. I wrote the book, The Invisible Patient, the emotional, financial, and physical toll on family caregivers. There's tons of other books now. There's tons of other books on family caregiving, like the one that you just mentioned, on starting the conversations, doing research, use free resources too. Look on YouTube. There's tons of, I have a podcast, Tony, this has been your mission too, to try to educate consumers. So there's all sorts of free information out there, the Alzheimer's Association. So leverage that information and say, look, this is overwhelming. There's so many things that we need to know as a family and we don't. Let's work with a professional to do this. Other ways that you can broach the topic is leverage a crisis. Mom, you just got out of the hospital. Dad wandered out of the house when you were taking a nap. Leverage a crisis, or leverage someone else's crisis. If you have someone else in the family that had a medical issue and you saw how overwhelmed the family was because they didn't have anything in place. They didn't know what their parents had in order. And they certainly didn't realize that we have a massive shortage of healthcare workers, and families don't understand that lay of the land. So those are ways that you can broach it. You can also say, mom and dad, is it important for you to have as much say in your aging years and where you receive your care and how you get cared for? Is it important for you to have a say in that? Is it important for you to be as independent as long as possible? Ask them questions that they really can't say no to. And then you can say, well, we don't really know what we're doing because we're in unfamiliar area here. But that's why we do these podcasts, right? To expose the world at large that there's resources, qualified resources out here that can actually help them.
Yeah, that is important. There are so many resources out there. First of all, is just raising the visibility,
Yeah.
and like you and I are doing, and you do on your podcast, and there's other people who are starting to say, hey, look, this is a real issue. You need to think about this and create an aging plan, um, have that in place. So what are a couple key elements that you recommend people think about when they're putting together their aging plan?
Well, here's what I want to say about when families try to put their aging plan in place. They don't know what they're doing. And I can only undo so much, right? Because, like I said, when I started Care Right, it's because I already had 22 years of data to know that families don't understand dementia. They think assisted living is the same as skilled rehab. They think Medicare and Medicaid are the same thing. So you can't, it's not fair to expect a family to be able to put their own aging plan in place because there's too many unknowns, or there's family dynamics that get in the way. 85% of my week is spent doing family mediation because by the time they come to me or find me, they're just simply not getting along. Everybody has a different idea of quality of life, of how inheritance should be spent, of how poorly mom and dad are doing at home or how well they're doing at home, or where parents should live. And when kids try to do their own research, right, or try to do the right thing, so to speak, with then when they start doing the tours and stuff like that, they're like, oh my gosh, we didn't realize that mom and dad had to have, $2 million of net worth to financially qualify to get into a different care, to get into a care community. Or the bold reality of, well, these care communities have a 20-person waiting list or a 5-year waiting list. Or maybe you live in an area that just doesn't have a lot of home care options. 30% of my clients that are trying to age in place at home are on the waiting list of all of the home care companies in their area because there's such a massive shortage. So even if you've said, yeah, mom and dad, we'll do our best to try to keep you at home, do they really have $30,000 to $60,000 a month per month to pay for companion care?
Wow.
And if so, great, but how long, what's their financial runway to be able to afford to do that? So then they don't break the bank trying to stay at home and now financially jeopardized their ability to get into various care communities where they could have activities and socialization and engagement and 3 meals a day and a call button in case they need help and transportation to their appointments and stuff like that. So that's why we help families understand kind of the lay of the land. We also help them understand that, you have to be very careful that a lot of these senior care communities have been cited for abuse and neglect year after year since the pandemic. And again, they also just don't realize that your parents have to qualify to get into these different care communities. They can't be too demented to get into assisted living. They can't be wheelchair bound to get in certain facilities. Certain facilities won't take people with Parkinson's disease. So families, even if they did try to put their own aging plan in place, they're going to stumble because we've done a good job in healthcare of making it very confusing for them to navigate it on their own.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I do want to say one thing before I forget is I just want to caution people. I want to caution families because this is why there are a lot of there's a lot of people out there who are trying to now become senior consultants, senior care consultants, and they have no background. They don't understand dementia. They don't they don't know how to do family meetings or family mediation. They themselves don't understand how to navigate senior care. And so how to make sure that you are comfortable working with a senior consultant. If I'm not the if you're like, oh, this Annalee doesn't seem for whatever reason like she's the right fit to work with, that's fine. But please, please, please do your due diligence. Look these people up on LinkedIn. What is their actual history? Google them. Have they written a book? Have they committed their career to helping families and their aging loved ones navigate aging? Are they coming from a totally different profession, realizing, oh, I'm not making any money at that profession. I better figure out how I can monetize my book of business or my people, my network. And so they're like hanging a shingle and now becoming senior experts or aging experts. And so find out like, what is your actual history? How would you help us as a family? What are your actual qualifications? Have you ever worked and run, like be an operator of a memory care unit or a senior care community? Or are you coming from a different industry and they're learning off of you, right? And just as important, how do they get paid? There's a lot of different companies out there that are popping up by the hundreds. And all they do is they sell the senior to the care facility, right? And then they get a commission
Wow.
from the care facility, but there's no planning. There's no, what's the plan if mom runs out of money before she dies and the facility is a private pay only facility, she's going to get kicked out. Or what if the company that moved her in there because they get the commission, what if they moved her into assisted living, but now she needs memory care. So now the facility is saying, okay, family, you have 60 days to find a place for your mom to live because she's wandering and we can't have her here in assisted living. So just be very careful about what your comfort level is. There's a lot of those companies out there that they don't cost the family anything, but I promise you it will cost you something, because when they mess up or they don't realize that there's all these facilities that have been cited for abuse and neglect, because they're just looking at, okay, who's going to give me the highest commission for the sale of the senior, then you just have to be very careful. There's a lot of people out there that might not have the best intentions with your family, and certainly your aging loved one, vulnerable adult.
Yeah, that is a huge issue that we could do a whole episode on. So,
Yeah.
one of the questions that comes to mind, and this is a challenge in a lot of areas, is there's one you, and you can only serve so many clients. So, if somebody engages you, is what services do you provide at Care Right?
Yeah, so I've got a team of 20.
Oh,
And so,
wow. Okay.
yeah. But we facilitate family meetings. And again, it's all over Zoom, because we join in families' journeys wherever they are in the care decision or dementia journey and wherever they live. Because again, I went virtual on purpose in 2011. It didn't take a pandemic for me to be like, oh, I have to go virtual. I was already a pioneer in this space. And so we facilitate family meetings, again, find out what's working well, what's not working well. What are the goals? Mom and dad's goals are age in place at home and not be a burden on their kids. Kids' goals are, I want my parents to be safe, happy, and have the best quality of life possible. We do what's called a care matrix, where we're like, okay, that's great that your goal is to age in place at home, but based on where you live or the areas that you wanted us to explore these different care options for you, there's no home care available because they're all short staffed. And so even though you want to age in place at home, if there's no care available, there's no care available. So then where are you going to live? And so then we have a whole component of the pros and cons and considerations of moving in with the kids and all the things that go with that. And then we kind of take these families in the aging plan through kind of like a curriculum, because it's all about education. So you as a family can make informed decisions. And so then we also outline different care communities, but for us to outline 5 or 8 different care communities, we had to rule out 15 to 20 because they've been cited for abuse and neglect and actual harm to people that are under their care, or they have a 40-person waiting list, or where mom lives, dad needs memory care, but there's no memory care available in the area. And so now you've got mom living in one care facility and dad in a different care facility. So we help them understand the actual reality of the lay of the land of aging in place at home. How much is it going to cost? What are going to be the safety triggers so that we can all say, yep, when these 7 things happen or dad wanders out again, then that's going to be our cue that, yep, we need to get care in there or more care, or they can't stay at home because they're not safe. And then we also do the grab and go, which see that there. We do the grab and go because, again, when I was an employee, adult kids and even spouses had no idea what the other spouse or the parents had in order. They didn't know accounts and passwords or what mom and dad's aging issues are for end of life. No funeral arrangements taken care of. And when your dad loses capacity, whether through dementia or a stroke, you can't say, oh, dad, who's your financial advisor, or where are your accounts? What are your passwords? So you can't really do your job if you've been designated as that financial power of attorney, if you don't have any of the tools to be able to do so, like a copy of the document. And where are all of the accounts and passwords, right? That's just an example. Or if they're a business owner, the business succession plan. If your parents have a pet, what's the pet emergency plan so that you don't end up with Fluffy if you don't want Fluffy because you don't like Fluffy. And so it's a very comprehensive, because these are things that happen every day. And the kids are like, oh, I never liked that dog in the first place. And now I got stuck with a dog and it doesn't like our dog, or, there's all these real life things that happen. And so we do comprehensive aging planning that includes all of that and many other things too. But the reality is 92% of our families, Tony, are unfortunately coming to us in crisis mode, which is sad because they're overwhelmed, they're scared, and we're not seeing them at their best because they are overwhelmed and scared. And they're not prepared. And that's again why I said at the top of this podcast, 85% of my week is spent doing family mediation because they're simply not getting along. And so we also do, aging plan implementation, just like a financial planner. Families will pay a financial planner to put a financial plan in place. Well, that's our aging plan, right? And then they stay on the financial planners or wealth manager services retainer model to then keep that financial plan going and adjust it when the market changes and all those kind of things. I have that same business model. It's just that I come at it from more of a care model. So it's care packages. So most of our families stay on our services usually until their loved one passes away, because that aging process is bumpy. And by the time the kids come to us in the first place, they're done. They love their parents, but they don't have any more emotional bandwidth, financial bandwidth, or physical bandwidth, because they're like, I can't keep taking time off work. My wife is getting ticked off because I'm always worried about are mom and dad okay, and I'm not present in my own family relationships. So there's all this like psychosocial issues that come into place when families don't have an aging plan.
Yeah, well, one thing I've heard quite a bit from others is your kids are not your aging plan.
But
you
they
can't.
end up being their aging plan because 58% of adult kids end up thrust into family caregiving, and they're not prepared for it. Maybe they don't want to be. Maybe dad was a jerk, and now they're like, and now dad had a stroke, and you think I'm going to go there and take care of him? Like, he wasn't nice to me in the first place. Or maybe they're just simply not wired to be a family caregiver. Or they just simply can't because they're taking care of a spouse who has MS or has cancer. And they're like, look, or a special needs child. And they're like, look, I'm already spread too thin. So what happens though, unfortunately, is the adult kids are the assisted living. They're doing the care coordination, calling the doctor's offices, getting their parents to physical therapy, ordering food or making food and bringing it over, doing their laundry. They're doing all that, calling the insurance company. They're doing all of that stuff already, and it's overwhelming. It becomes a full-time job.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it usually falls to women.
It does, or the in-law, and then the daughter-in-laws are like, look, I didn't like your parents in the first place, because real rawness comes out. Like the real deal comes out during these family meetings, because they're like, look, I tolerate your parents, but don't expect me to go over and bathe your mom, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes like family meeting unfiltered.
Definitely. So one quick question. You mentioned your grab and go. If I remember correctly, is that a resource that anybody can pick up, or is that just for your clients?
No, yeah, for sure. No, yeah, that's a very Iowan thing. No, yeah. So they can actually I've made it as simple as possible for families to be successful. So if they work with us, we include the grab and go checklist, but we also know that we do, a la carte. So families can go right on my carerightinc.com website. If you scroll down, you'll see the grab and go, and you can just order the grab and go checklist on their own, and then they can do it as an independent project on their own, but that's also part of why we have those ongoing care packages as well, because there's a lot of information that families need to gather, and they don't get it done. And then when dementia progresses, they're like, oh yeah, we never filled all that stuff in. And so we don't really know what mom and dad have in order. So they can buy my book as an individual, like right off the website. They can buy the grab and go checklist and then upload it into whatever platform is secure, because it's like a 22-page checklist of everything families need to have in order. And that's everyone over the age of 18. So one thing about the grab and go that always comes up is families are like, well, mom and dad, you're getting older, so it's time that we put all your affairs in order and all that kind of stuff. And then mom and dad get like, well, what about you? And so I always encourage families, like, do this as a team project, like mom and dad, there's 12 headings in it. And so we always say, well, pick which heading you want to start with. Maybe you want to start with the legal planning because you already have that done, and then you can just boom, put it right in there. Or maybe you want to start with the funeral section first because that's the icky section and just get that over with first. So which heading do you want to start with, and what pace do you want to go to get it done, and do it as a family project so that no one feels singled out. And I'll share with you, Tony, like, because people are like, well, what age should I be to get this done? And I'm like, yesterday. Whatever age you were yesterday. Because here's the thing. I was 40 years old, just came back from an international speaking engagement on dementia and senior care, and was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, simply helping an 82-year-old gentleman cross the street because he needed some help. He was all red and had some cardiac issues apparently prior to that. So I was like, oh, let me call 911. And he's like, no, just get me across the street. My wife is waiting for me in the car. Long story short, he's telling me about all of his health issues. And all of a sudden he yells, watch out. We're in the crosswalk of the street. And a school bus driver was distracted by the kids on the bus. And she blew through the four-corner stop because she was looking inside the mirror instead of like through the windshield. And she blew through the four-corner stop, and she did not apply the brakes until she saw my face break the headlight of the school bus. I'm 5'11", thank God, because if I was a tiny little waif, I would have been like and run over. But I'm 5'11", good dairy farm kid, good strong bones, but still, facial trauma, it broke, this is all titanium, broke my ribs, internal bleeding, like it was a mess. But because I do what I do for a living, my care right was only 1 year old, but because I do what I do for a living and work with families literally every day that find themselves ill prepared, I don't want that for me. I don't ever want to feel vulnerable, and I don't ever want to have things in me that I don't want, like feeding tubes and ventilators. I carry my living will, I carry my healthcare power of attorney, and I carry my do not resuscitate. Because I want a say in what happens to me if I'm nonverbal, right? And I also, because here's the problem that families do, they might get all this stuff in order, but what they don't do is they don't communicate it to their kids. And so the kids are like, I don't know what's in order. We've never talked about it, right? And so if you get one thing from this podcast, get your affairs in order no matter how old you are, carry your living will, carry your healthcare power of attorney, and get either your full code or your do not resuscitate documented, and carry that with you so that just in case something happens to you. Fortunately, I did not lose consciousness, but if I would have, then they would have found it in my backpack, in my purse, right? And then it'd be like, oh, she doesn't want any of this stuff. And they would have had my brother and my sister, because I'm single, they would have had my brother and my sister contact information. But because I did not lose consciousness, thank God, I could call my family and say, look, I just got hit by a school bus. Remember, I don't want any of this stuff. I don't want anything prolonging my life. And they're like, yeah, I know, because you've told us like 9 million times. But that's the important piece, is because you want to have multiple conversations about these kind of what families perceive as uncomfortable, so that it's muscle memory, right? So when something happens, because hundreds of people get T-boned in an intersection just simply trying to get home from work. So not to be the Debbie Downer, but these are the real life things that happen. So let's be prepared for it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. So, Annalee, to wrap up, I'm going to move into what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. And these are three questions I ask all of my guests, super fast questions. The first one is, what's one myth you're trying to break about aging and caregiving?
So, so one myth I'm trying to break, one I'm gonna is that it has to be a terrible experience, right? So I want to switch that over to caregiving and aging and dementia can be a positive experience when families have an aging plan, when they understand the disease that they're taking care of, when they understand the care options, when they understand how much care costs, when they understand the toll of being a family caregiver. And when they realize, oh, this isn't working, we need to shift things up and activate our aging plan, it can be a positive experience. So I'm trying to shift that mindset of aging is terrible, dementia, caregiving is terrible. It is when you don't have a plan in place. It absolutely is, because you will get burned out.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. For everything, you want to have a plan.
Yeah.
So the next question is, let's get out the time machine for a minute. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, what is one thing you tell yourself about an aging plan? Maybe going back to your 20s or 30s.
Well, so I've worked in senior care. Actually, I've worked in senior care my entire life. So all I know is what happens as we age, because I was a candy striper, then I worked as an activity assistant and then a social worker. So what I would tell my younger self in my 20s is probably not to take everything so seriously, because imagine my whole life all I've ever been exposed to and around are elderly people who aren't well, right? They're frail, they're elderly, they're demented, they're dying. And so I've always carried a little bit of a heaviness in my heart, because I know that your life can change like that. And so if I went back to my younger self, I would say two things. Maybe do a few more things that were just fun and not have to try to save the world. Because that's my problem. I'm trying to save the world. And number two is you can't be everything to everyone.
I love that. You
And to
can't be
give yourself
everything.
grace.
Yeah, I love that. And give yourself grace. I'm just making sure I write that down because that's always great to share in the show notes. So to close out, what is your number one tip for changing how we think about aging and caregiving?
What is my number one myth?
Tip.
Oh, tip. I'm sorry, because you kind of
Oh no, that's okay.
you went
I think
out.
the signals.
Yeah, the signal's a little wonky. So one of the tips is, if you want to have a successful, productive, non-family relationship destroying journey, we need to be putting an aging plan in place now. All the people that had major strokes last Thursday did not wake up thinking, oh, I think I'm going to have a major stroke. Let's just stress test our family and our finances. But guess what? That happened. And if you're a financial planner on here listening, the human side of the financial plan is critical. You can't keep leaving that under the rug and not having conversations about it. Your clients, if they're advisors listening to this, these situations are what keeps your clients up at night. You need to start asking, what keeps you up at night? Are you a family caregiver? What conversations have you had with your family about aging and caregiving and dementia? And using that collaborative approach and partner with companies who actually know how to solve that problem.
That's great advice. So, where can people learn more about you, about Care Right, and pick up a copy of The Invisible Patient?
So they can pick up a copy of The Invisible Patient. You can get it on Amazon if you like Audible. The Invisible Patient also has its own website. It's called invisiblepatientbook.com. But if you want to learn more about Care Right, you can go on carerightinc.com. There's a 30-minute consult that you can click the button and find a slot on my calendar. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn, Annalee Kruger, and you'll see all of the different coaching programs, consulting, you'll see everything that I have to offer on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching and listening, if you have access to the show notes, I'll make sure that all these links are in the show notes so you can find them there as well. So Annalee, thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me, Tony. And just honestly, I know we were talking about this before, but thank you for all that you're doing, all the effort and finding all these guests for your podcast to help educate the world at large about aging and caregiving and all that goes with that. So thank you.
You're welcome, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the work you're doing because it's something we can do together. And for people watching and listening, we've talked about it. We've talked about other people who are active in this area. So there are a lot of resources to at least get you started on a journey. But as Annalee said, at a certain point, you're going to need a qualified professional to help you. And to close out, of course, thank you as always for tuning in. If this episode helped you to change the way you think about aging and caregiving, please be sure to subscribe and to share with a friend. You can also go to my website at tonystewart.com to join the Get Ready movement and get access to a whole lot of resources in my newsletter. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.